Well, as the season winds down here in southern Alberta, I've been busy teaching both diploma and degree students at the Lethbridge Polytechnic, which is the new name of Lethbridge College. Now, as is my annual tradition, I'll be slowing down on my newsletter and podcast production during the fall, and I'll be taking an extended break over the holiday season. So you can expect one final newsletter in early December, with the next edition happening in about February. Now, in case you're new here, I'll introduce myself. I'm an author and independent agronomist from the Western Canadian prairies, specializing in climate-smart agriculture. I focus on scientifically proven practices that benefit the planet, and just as importantly, farmers' economic sustainability. So be sure to visit my website, www.plantsdigsoil.com, to learn about my book, Practical Regeneration, and for the services that I offer for farmers and agribusiness. So before we get to the news this month, I just want to put a plug in for the irrigated crop production update. It happens January 23rd, 2025 in Lethbridge, Alberta. I'm on the planning committee and we'll have more detail for you in December. But in the meantime, just mark your calendars with this date. We aim to have a one-day conference with great speakers and information. And just as importantly, lots of time to network and to see the latest the industry has out there. So let's get into the articles for this month. The first one is called Texas A&M AgriLife Researchers Identify Novel Approach to Minimize Nitrogen Loss in Crops. It seems that no matter what you add to the soil, the existing soil community drives the processes. That's why this article piqued my interest. Researchers are now investigating how plant genetics influence microbial diversity and abundance in the soil. So in this case, they're focusing on sorghum plants that promote biological nitrification inhibitors. And here's a quote from the article: "The BNI trait will suppress nitrification, a microbial process that converts fertilizer-derived ammonium in the soil to nitrate, preventing its escape as nitrates in water or nitrous oxide, a greenhouse gas." So essentially, instead of adding an inhibitor that only works temporarily, they're identifying plants that naturally provide this inhibitor to the soil, working throughout the season. I think that's pretty cool. So check out the article for more information. The next article is Microbes Matter During Pasture Restoration. So it's similar research in this one, except it's on alfalfa. And here's a quote from the article. "The historical thought around why pasture productivity declines over time is chemical autotoxicity or soil sickness developing through the production of secondary chemicals from alfalfa. Another possibility is that the genetics in alfalfa varieties trigger biological response in the soil. We know that there's lots of different breeding for disease resistance in alfalfa varieties. The resistant genes in the alfalfa could affect how the plant interacts with bacteria in the soil. There's evidence that some alfalfa varieties respond differently to specific beneficial microbes." So in other words, breeding for disease resistance may have inadvertently led to varieties that don't interact well with the beneficial microbes. In the past, breeding was based on what we could see above ground, without much understanding of the impact below ground. So roots and microbes are hard to observe, but this new technology is beginning to change that. Now, perhaps in the future, we'll develop plants that can do a whole lot more in the soil than we ever imagined. And next up, I'd like to share two articles from Robert Pavlis, the gardener that I've mentioned before. His latest article on soil health is an excellent primer. Microbes don't exist because we put them there. They thrive when there's food for them. Add more food, you get more microbes. So the two articles I've discussed above also illustrate that with specific plants and their genetics, that plays a role in determining what microbes thrive in the soil as well. His other article is about bricks and using that for measuring whether your plant will be resistant to insects and disease. There are some that claim that healthy plants don't get attacked by these. So while bricks meters are great for measuring the sweetness of grapes to guide harvest timing, they aren't particularly useful for predicting plant resistance to pests or disease. Now, what does help to keep pests at bay are natural areas around fields. I've previously talked about the messy areas surrounding fields and their beneficial halo effect. This article, called "Researchers Make a Case for Protecting Field Boundaries," explores new research that is aimed at helping farmers understand what kinds of messy areas are beneficial and which might harm the crops. Now, there's some interesting news about integrating cattle and solar panels. A large-scale project in Alberta is now using vertical solar panels. The design allows for access for maintenance, and it enables the cattle to graze freely on the vegetation in between. The study will also examine how the shade from the panels affects plant growth, particularly in reducing water use. Now, to wrap up, I have a couple articles on regenerative outside the farm. Consumers like the idea of it, but when told it will cost them more money, they quickly retract their support. So you can read about it in the article that I'll have linked. I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but all of the articles will be linked in the episode description. And finally, regenerative agriculture is sold as a climate solution. Can it do all it says? This is from the radio show All Things Considered on NPR, so you can read or listen to the original one by going to the link. The article aligns a lot with what I've been saying over the years in the podcast and in my book, Practical Regeneration. Here's a short quote from the article that I think encompasses most of what they are talking about. A lot of the enthusiasm in regenerative agriculture involves the idea of storing more carbon in the soil to slow global warming. This makes many soil scientists wary. And here's a quote from a soil scientist, Eric Slesarov. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's a professor of ecology at Yale University. That's when one's spidey senses ought to tingle, because those claims are challenging to back up. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you again next time.